Welcome to the Purpose Focused Advisor. This show is for financial advisors who want to grow their business with clarity, lead with purpose, and build a life that reflects what matters most.
Yes, it's time again for the Purpose Focused Advisor. Rob Brown here, along with my guest, Adam Obrecht. Freshly back from ziplining in Colorado. We can talk about that more in a minute. But more importantly, Adam is the owner of AO Wealth Advisory in Urbandale, Iowa. He started AO back in 2010. And Adam, tell me a little bit more about your background and what led you to starting AO Wealth.
Yeah, the genesis of it was there was no other option. Starting before that, got out of college, went into ag and commercial banking. Once I got married, though, moved out of a small town Iowa and moved to the Des Moines area. And that's when I got involved more on the asset side of a balance sheet, dealing with finances of the stocks at a broker dealer. My job there was to train other advisors. And after about 5 years of being the person that people called to say, how do I do this? And at the beginning, my answer was, I'll get back to you. 5 years later was, here's how I do it. Got an opportunity to buy another advisor's book of business that was retiring. And smaller book of business, but it was enough to kind of launch me out of management into advising. Moved forward about a couple of years, and I was then inside of a CPA firm, took that book of business with me inside of a CPA firm. The 2008, 2009 financial crisis hit, and it hit that firm hard because they had a lot of real estate clients. They looked around and said, you're our non-CPA inside of a CPA firm. Would you like to go on your own? And so that's what I ended up doing. I had talked to quite a few other firms in town in my market, and none of them just seemed to be the right fit. There was investment philosophy differences, financial planning philosophy differences, work-life balance differences, just never quite felt right. So I started AO Wealth Advisory in June of 2010 with a wife who was 6 months pregnant at the time.
Nice. Was it just you at that point working in the business?
Yeah, so it was just me. Had a small office shared with a property casualty agent, buddy of mine that 2:00 in the afternoon, he was also kind of starting out, and we would always sit down and talk about business a little bit at about that time when the afternoon doldrums kind of hit. So I had some great conversations, and a lot of times those conversations about, do I really want to spend $100 on this item? So pinching pennies as two small businesses at that point in time.
Yeah. And now, was it 15 years later?
Yeah. So 15 years and 4 office spaces later, have now a staff of 5, myself plus 4 others, and continue to hope to grow beyond that, and manage about 300 households at this point, and have averaged about a 20% growth rate through that time frame, which is a good enough growth rate to have some opportunities, but not so high that we've had challenges that sink us.
Yeah. Controlled, planned growth. Sounds like a lot of intentionality in the way that you've gone about making sure you get that really good growth every year without going crazy.
Yep.
So would you, if you were Adam back in your early training days, it seems you would give yourself a really high score for having actually listened to the training and built the business the right way.
Yeah. And a lot of the training I was doing was, what is this product? How does it work? Does it fit the client needs? And got more into financial planning. The broker dealer I started out was heavy into trading. And their NASDAQ trading desk was what generated most of their profits as a company. And so shifting more to that financial planning, shifting more to assets under management and advisory business. I think like everybody that's been in the industry for a period of time, you evolve as your knowledge grows. And so we've continued to evolve into what we are today, which is, financial planning focused firm that does investments well.
Great. And so one thing that I learned about your firm in preparation for this podcast is that you actually focus your marketing on 30 to 40-year-olds, and your average client age is 45. And I find that interesting, because in the world that we live in now, you will get a lot of advisors who say you can't build a business with 30 to 40-year-olds, and you have to have clients whose average age is at least well into the 50s. Talk about that and what you did to kind of decide to do that and why it's working for you.
Yeah, very intentional, and early on, very intentional. I saw a lot of advisors that their clients' average looked like them. As they were getting close to retirement, their clients were 10 years ahead of them age-wise. Also early on in the business, I started in my early 20s. I got I've got kids your age comments. And for me, it was, yeah, but your kids will still be working when you're retired. And so that's why you want to hire an advisor that's younger than you. I can't use that marketing as much anymore. But there's others in my office that can use those kind of comments. And for us, it was, what does the pictures on the website look like? What do the marketing brochures look like? What are the outward focused items that we're doing? What information are we targeting to? Who's that avatar, as the marketing people would say? And we've always had that focus on that 30 to 40-year-old couple that has questions, that we're the first advisor they're hiring. They don't know what a financial planner is or does or how it works. And so that's what our marketing has been focused around. We pick up clients outside of that just because of other activities in the community or client referrals, centers of influence. But we've been able to keep that average age pretty low comparatively to other firms. But you also have to be very efficient with those clients. Does a 30-year-old need to go in depth about trust and estate planning and spend 20 to 30 hours of our time describing that to them when they just got their first 401k rollover? Probably not. And so you got to be intentional about what services you're providing to them so that it doesn't kill your time, which is your most valuable asset, is the time that we have. We can toss a lot of technology at them. That's easy. But it takes time to explain some of that technology, and we just want to make sure that we're cognizant of that as we work with those clients.
Yeah, I find that really helpful, and I'm sure the audience is picking up on this too. That intentionality carried across, not just saying my niche is 30 to 40-year-olds because I'm only 25 and I'm getting this business started. It went beyond that. It went to how you could serve them, deciding what you talk to them about, the way that you define or explain financial planning to them. Not that you're trying to hold anything back, but you know what they need and the best way to deliver in a way that's efficient for you, for your team, and for them. Because who wants to spend 5 hours talking about I don't know, some form of trust that only applies to somebody who's 65 years old and has 3 generations to worry about.
Yep. And again, it's about time management there. Of sometimes, to my staff's chagrin, my decision making is very fast, and so I'm like, hey, here's the direction I think we should go with this client, and we start going down that path quickly instead of sometimes doing deep analysis, especially on those smaller clients. But the advantage of those smaller clients is they're not taking RMDs. They're not taking lifestyle distributions. They're adding to their accounts. They're growing what we're managing for them. So they become increasingly valuable over time versus picking up only 70-year-olds. Now you have all this distribution planning that you're doing. And that's a drawdown on your business every year. We're net positive on our flows every year from our clients versus net negative, which is also, I think, unique in the industry.
Yeah, no, I think that it is because there are a lot of advisors that I meet who love their 70-plus-year-old clients, except when it comes to RMD time and figuring out the most efficient way to make those distributions and the things that are itinerant to doing that.
Yep.
So what's the message? So as you're out there as a firm looking for more 30 to 40-year-olds, what's the message that you're sending as to why they need you and how you'll serve them, knowing that that same group is also probably more savvy as it relates to technology? Being a do-it-yourselfer is easier than it ever has been, and they're certainly being bombarded with the likes of firms who will aid them in doing it themselves and squeezing out the financial planning firm.
Yeah, I guess we find a lot more that the more information, the more confused they get. And so we can be that filter for them and say, this fits your situation. You know, in Iowa, we don't have a lot of startup firms. And so having concentrated stock positions and how to manage that isn't something we do a lot of, but you'll find a lot of information out there about it. And so the clients that, hey, I got my company stock, does this apply to me? Like, no, it's a small portion of what you have. It's not, you know, startup money concentration that this article is talking about or this search is talking about. And even with AI, the sources that AI pulls from is a lot of times more broad than what the client needs. And so bringing it down to a quick answer for them usually helps a lot. Most of our client meetings, they'll come in with, hey, here's the 5 questions or so that we've got for the day. We're able to blitz through those versus them taking hours upon hours to research it. And same with the investments is we expect our investments to be good. We do a heck of a lot of research on them. Most clients don't want to do research on the investments. And so back to the marketing piece too, we kind of got 4 mindsets that we look at in the marketing. We've got the Fred the Turtle. We got Pete on the Path. We got Anna the Achiever and Matt the Millionaire is how we think of marketing. And when clients come in, how do they fit one of those? You know, the turtle one is we're going to flip that turtle over. If you find a turtle on its back, what do? You flip it over and you let it go on its way. We're probably not providing much more service to that person. They may come back when they need more services. And then the Pete on the Path is somebody that, hey, they're getting there. They have all the indicators that they're going to be a saver, they're going to be a grower. They just may not quite have the assets quite yet. So is there something we can help them with today that they turn into a great client? And then the other 2 with Amy the Achiever and Matt the Millionaire, both of these are delegators. They're delegating because they've been successful in what they do. They know that they need to delegate this portion of their life off. And that's what becomes really good clients for us.
Yeah, I love that. You have 4 avatars of different client types that you know how to respond to each one of them, to have those ongoing conversations, to plug them into the way that you do business that is most efficient for them. And then something else I heard you say that sounds really important is, and maybe this is because you move too fast, you help your clients move fast in that you are cutting away things they don't need to be spending their time on. So if you're saying, you know, we're your wealth advisory firm because you want to put us in a decision to make, in a position to make your important financial decisions, and you can just go about living your life, raising your kids, doing your work, going to church, whatever it might be, you're letting them do that. You're being intentional about that, and they see the time savings in addition to the planning and the goal setting that you're doing. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, and it turns over into the client meeting side of things. A lot of times we do have video conference meetings because by the time you would drive to our office, find childcare or bring the kids with, have the meeting and turn around and go back home, well, that was a 2-hour time suck out of your day.
Right.
instead of a 45-minute meeting over Zoom with us, gets them what they need to know today. We can follow up on some email items and they can go about their day and get the kids to softball and soccer and all the items that they need to do in their day. They don't have the time of a retiree to sit down and sip the coffee and talk about the grandkids. We have those conversations with those clients, but that 30 and 40-year-old doesn't have the time in their day to have those conversations.
Yeah. So, Adam, as is obvious, the name of this podcast is The Purpose-Focused Advisor. When you think about the business that you've built, how would you describe maybe what you thought the purpose of what you were doing was when you first started AO back 15 years ago, and how has that evolved and gotten more focused?
The true genesis of AO actually started back on a beach in Jamaica on a mission trip, reading a book about Christian business owners. And Larry Burkett was one of the people profiled in the book. Have not since seen the book or been able to find the book, so I can't tell you what the title was.
Well, maybe somebody listening to the podcast will hear this and they have the book, because I can tell you, I talked to enough advisors who are fanboys of Larry Burkett that it's crazy. It's got to be out there.
Yeah. So Zig Ziglar and Larry Burkett were in the same book on their profile, basically. And so that was kind of the genesis of serving clients with a purpose and being intentional about it, bringing in faith-based financial planning. And that's when then out of that book, I found Crown Financial Ministries, as well as what's now called Kingdom Advisors. Went through the certification process while I was part of the CPA firm after getting my CFP. And then when I launched AO Wealth Advisory, was intentional that, in God's humor, yes, it's Adam Obrecht, but it's also Alpha Omega. We're talking about beginning, we're talking about end, we're talking about all the financial items in between. And so the name of the company was intentional, but also God's humor of my initials.
Right. And so I'm just assuming, just because as I've gotten to know you, you don't sit still. Everything intentionally grows and gets better because you're seeing how the pieces fit together. How is that the purpose behind your interjecting your faith into your conversations grown over the years, and how has that helped develop the relationships that you have with your clients?
Yeah, some clients blatantly know our faith, and we have the conversations. We talk about gifts to church and family and how it fits into their faith life and their faith walk. And then others, they're getting the same planning. They just may not know that it comes with a biblical backing to it, that it comes from, as Kingdom Advisors puts it, transcendent knowledge that's 4,000 years old. This isn't new information. We have Monte Carlo theory that really, to me, is a follow off of Ecclesiastes, divide your assets in 7 or 8. So we've diversified our assets. We've given a Nobel Prize to copying the Bible.
A Nobel Prize to copying the Bible. That's a pretty good trick.
Yes.
So, but how do conversations around faith come into your conversations more and more as your practice evolves? Because I have to imagine. Well, let me stop. I believe as that the financial advisors are in a position to be extraordinary disciples for Christ, and sometimes discipleship is wearing that discipleship on your sleeves because you just need to make it known because you understand a situation. Other times it's a quiet discipleship where somebody just can watch what you do as a Christian, and that helps them grow or question, and then maybe opens the door later on. Do you see that in different? Are there 4 avatars for that? Is there a
Yeah, from us, it's more the second. It's more the St. Thomas Aquinas way of preach the gospel and use words if needed. So it's how we interact with them. It's how we interact with their families. It's how we interact with their investments. Um, how are we doing this in a Christ-centered way? Obviously, we can't guarantee any better returns or better results because of our faith, but there can be a piece that about it that is different from purely the numbers. The numbers tell one story, but how you live out your life tells a whole different story. And
Right.
we're trying to match that the numbers follow how they want to live their life out. And especially those that come to us and talk about their faith, are your financial decisions following your faith decisions? Are we truly letting God be the steward of the resources that he's entrusted you with? Or are you trying to hold on too tight to them and be too controlling of the process versus letting the process happen?
How does that impact conversations when the market gets crazy and maybe even some of your clients are starting to, maybe they don't call you, but they want to call you, and you can feel that anxiousness.
Yeah, and I think most firms face this of you're going to have the anxious phone call, and if you know their faith, you can bring it back to that. Like, look, you're covered, you're taken care of. Is this the exact plan you want to see? No, but then that's also where we rely back on the numbers and back on the financial plan and go, even with this downturn, even when it's April 2nd of this year, your financial plan still works. Even in the '08 financial crisis, your financial plan still works. That's why we do the work we do, the planning, the testing, the math. But even when math doesn't inherently feel right, what else do you rely on? And that's when it goes back to faith. Because even though that we can show them every graph and chart and information that, hey, this is going to come back, the historicals are on your side, everything's good, the sleep at night factor may not quite be there yet. And that's where we can push back and go, and how's your prayer life going right now?
Yeah.
And usually the answer is, and I'll get back to you tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I think the dynamics of what happens when things go crazy will never change, but how we can react with the wisdom that we gain over time of just being, more mature in what we do for a living, but also more mature in our faith can really have an impact on those conversations and maybe even create a few more moments of discipleship.
Yep, absolutely.
So what's next? You've built this great firm. You really love the team that you work with. They're choosing to keep you around, even though sometimes you jump ahead on things too fast. What's next for you in this next phase of your business?
Yeah, I think it's really just continuing to share what we've done and how we've done it so others can do it. I mean, I truly believe there's more clients than good advisors out there. And so there's plenty of business. It's an abundance mentality versus scarcity for sure. But for our business itself, I mean, we continue to grow, continue to add staff to serve more clients deeper. If our goal is to truly know our client's finances better than the client does, then we need to continue to deepen our relationship with the client as well as with training of staff to know that and do that for others. So that's the internal piece there. And then at some point, it's that transition. Even though I'm not quite 50 yet, I think about that. What does it look like to transition this to another generation and another group of people, both internally, staff-wise is the preferred route. But what if it is an external? How does that affect the client? How does it affect the service that's provided and the care that they're going to get?
Yeah, and there are a lot of people waving flags these days saying they've got ideas for what you should do, even though you're not quite yet 50, because they've got a checkbook that they want to stroke a big check, and that takes that calm and that focus that is inherent in the way that you approach a lot of things, but your business in particular.
Yeah, and for me, I've been at this side of it long enough, the ownership side, that I'm probably unemployable for somebody else. And so if it is external, then how does that work from a control standpoint? And there's so many questions. But that's what going to conferences and being involved with others and having study groups and having other advisors across the industry to kind of go sit down and talk with and see how they did it, but also what issues do they bring to the table in how they've researched it too.
Yeah, I think that's right on. So it's about time to land the plane. But before we do, I've got three more questions. I told you I'd only have two more questions at the end, but I have three because I forgot to ask one. Is there anything that you are challenged by that may get in the way from the plan that you have for continuing to grow your firm and build your team?
Playing office too much. And here's the plan and here's what I do. The separation between those two. And the playing office too much is part of that. It's so easy to get distracted, to feel like you're making progress, whether it's the old guard of reading the Wall Street Journal or watching CNBC, or I got to research this item that really doesn't have a bearing on an existing client or potential future client, versus taking that time and going, how do I invest that time in my business or in my family or in myself, instead of letting it just dribble away. And having two teenagers as well, so the social media side of things can easily be that. I feel like we all have some sort of vice that steals our time. And I'd say that's the biggest is being intentional at the time so it doesn't get stolen away.
Yeah, because when you're running a business like yours, there is time because there's very little that can happen that can actually like panic you and throw you into a fit where your days or weeks are turned upside down. And so, but that does leave that quiet time, that empty time, that time to think and to wonder and to pray or however you might want to think about that, to say, okay, where am I supposed to be spending more time? What is something that else that God may be calling me to do in this season? Maybe it's resting up because your kids are getting older and they're going to keep you running around, and that's okay too. But there's something to being intentional about the time that you've created for yourself, maybe in some ways unintentionally. Yeah,
no, definitely. We have the ability to be out of the office quite a bit. To be disconnected quite a bit if we want to be. Does that affect the service the clients get? Is it detrimental to the service the clients get? And there's always that pull, but there's also pull from the family and from other outside activities in the same way. And so creating that balance, I haven't found the person that's perfectly satisfied with that balance. Sure, they exist. I just haven't been introduced to them yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure they exist 100% because I think there's that always that desire to want to grow and expand and do more that comes from being successful and having so many blessings and not wanting to just settle in. It's not, I want to retire quickly so I can play golf 5 days a week. That might be for some people, but probably not for somebody like yourself.
No. Yeah. My wife knows I get anxious after a 3-day weekend, so I couldn't imagine more time off would look like sometimes.
There you go.
Or unplanned time off.
Sure. So as we're wrapping up here, is there anything else that kind of jumps out to you that you'd like to share with the audience about, kind of who you are and what you're doing that might benefit? Because you see a lot of advisors out there. You were just I joked at the beginning of the episode about you being out ziplining. You were at the Future Proof retreat and spending time with a group of advisors.
Yeah, and thoroughly love those conversations. And so that's one of those things of having those conversations with other advisors. How are they doing it? How, from the startup person to the multi-billion-dollar firm, we all have a place in this market. And I love understanding where they're at, as well as we're in the advice business. And the advice business compared to coaching is the advice is giving answers. The coaching to me is helping people find the answer. If you can't tell, I'm more in the advice business. I like finding the answers and helping deliver those answers for people so they don't have to go through the struggle. Sometimes the struggle is needed, but connecting with others is always fun to see how they've done, what they've been successful at. Even to this morning at an advisor grouping, the advisor that just started in the business and has their second kid on the way, and how do they split their time was the conversation there as well.
Yeah. Important conversations. And I think that's the other opportunity that you and I both have as guys who've been around the industry for a long time is to give back, because we know what it was like. We had our own, stories of having, well, what do you say? Your wife was 6 months pregnant when you started your own firm. So you probably had some great advice for that young man this morning.
Yes, it was definitely an interesting time, and 3 insurances before a kid was born. That, don't wish that on anybody else.
Well, last thing, Adam, if somebody, and I'm sure this will include lots of people, wants to connect with you after this episode, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can reach out through our firm website as well as through LinkedIn. Both of those are great ways to connect up with myself at A Wealth Advisory.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to have those links in the show notes. So, Adam, thank you again for your time. To our audience, as always, thanks for listening in. And remember, we're rooting for your success. See you next week.
Thanks for listening to The Purpose Focused Advisor. If today's episode gave you something to think about or a step you're ready to take, head over to truestfancoaching.com. There you'll find tools, resources, and ways we can work together to help you lead with purpose and build the business and life you were meant for. If you enjoyed the show, we'd be grateful if you take a moment to rate and review it. It helps more advisors find their way here.